California's Central Valley, the state's heartland of agriculture and industry. Tonight, two candidates take the stage in the battle for the 22nd Congressional District. Rudy Salas.
My job, bringing in those resources to tackle our problems, to provide people with opportunities.
David Valadao.
There are always unintended consequences. Anytime we make those types of decisions, you have to take into account the type of impact it's going to have.
On the issues that matter to you most.
House prices went up a lot. The homelessness, rent prices, rent controls.
Don't like gas prices. The border. Everybody's been working on it, and they're still working on it.
Price of electricity and gas.
Live from your election headquarters in Bakersfield, California, this is Debate Night in the Central Valley.
Tonight, live from Bakersfield, one of the most closely watched races in the nation. Just a handful of votes could tip the scale and determine the balance of power in Washington. I'm Alex Fisher from KGET in Bakersfield, the site for tonight's debate.
I'm Brian Dormo with CBS 47 News in Fresno. We are so glad that you're with us tonight. We are your hosts over the course of this next hour. This is the only debate in this race, and you're watching it on air and online on one of two Nexstar media stations in Fresno and Kern counties. You can also follow along tonight's debate using the hashtag CA22debate. There, you will find additional information supporting tonight's questions.
Let's go over the rules for tonight. Each candidate will get 60 seconds to answer a question. If there's a follow-up or rebuttal, the candidate will get 30 seconds. And 15 seconds for clarification if needed. We will be reminding the candidates of those times throughout the night, and when their time is up, the sound of a bell will play.
Gentlemen, welcome. We begin tonight with immigration and the crisis at the southern border. A recent poll conducted by Emerson College shows immigration is one of the top issues for voters here in the 22nd District, right behind the economy and homelessness. Mr. Valadao, this question is for you, sir. Donald Trump says if elected, he will carry out mass deportations of undocumented immigrants. 50% of California farm workers are undocumented, a workforce the Central Valley relies on. You have advocated, sir, for immigration reform, including what you describe as earned citizenship. What is earned citizenship? And specifically, how do you plan to take on President Trump if you are both reelected? Sir, you have 60 seconds.
No, I appreciate the answer. And yes, I've always been an advocate for immigration, especially immigration reform, because we have a process that's been broken for a long period of time. Now, to address the specifics on the mass deportation issue, just last week, I sent a letter over to one of my colleagues from Texas, Tony Gonzalez, and ICE admitted that there's over 400,000 convicted criminals that have snuck across our border in this country. We've got about 15,000 of them that are convicted murderers, and about 13,000 are convicted rapists. So when we talk about the idea of sending people back across the border, I'd say those are the first we start with. But we have to have a longer conversation about securing the border. The House passed H.R. 2, sent it to the Senate, and Schumer sat on it. And then we've also passed bills like the Dignity Act to help people with path to citizenship. And we've also passed farm worker modernization that helps with some of the farm worker programs. I mean, we have to address it on all aspects and cover it from all different fronts. You can't just sit and complain about one perspective. But sadly, this administration has really dropped the ball and changed the way the border looked, and it's put a lot of political pressure on a small part of the overall problem.
Mr. Valadao, a follow-up for you, sir. Have you ever employed undocumented immigrants on your family's dairies in Kings County? And if you have, what is your message for them tonight? You have 30 seconds.
No, we have to, especially being in the political life, we have to be careful. Obviously, we know in the agriculture community, there's a lot of folks who are undocumented, but every time we hire people, we have to make sure they're legal, especially with the high profile of my situation.
Mr. Valadao, thank you, sir. Alex?
Mr. Salas, this next question is for you. On your campaign website, you list your priorities as drug prices, the economy, clean water, public safety, seniors, and women's health. Nowhere does it mention immigration. Why is that, and how would you prioritize immigration? You have 60 seconds.
Thank you for that, and thank you for looking at the website. Those are the issues that, as we're going door to door and talking to voters, those are the issues people are bringing up. Immigration is also one of them, but healthcare costs, women's right to choose is also another thing that constantly gets brought up. But no, immigration is a thing. We need a pathway to citizenship. I could tell you right now, when I was out knocking on doors and talking to voters, people are scared. People are scared about the rhetoric that they hear from the other side, about mass deportation plans, about tearing families apart again. You know, a lot of folks that I talk to are very scared about that. We need to make sure that we have a correct pathway for citizenship for people that have been following the rules, that live here and pay taxes, and that are a part of our society.
A follow-up for you, Mr. Salas. We asked voters in the 22nd District if they thought increasing deportations would make the immigration issue better or worse. In that poll, 41% of people say deportations would make the immigration situation better. Are they wrong? You have 30 seconds.
I can just tell you what I've been hearing from people on the phones and at the doors, and, you know, at any community event that I'm at, that people are talking to me about immigration. They come up to me and they're scared. They're scared about the rhetoric that's coming from the other side. They're scared for their parents. They're scared for their grandparents. They're scared for themselves when the Trump administration was talking about taking away people's citizenship, even if they're born here. Those are things that are scaring a lot of people out in the community. It's something that we need to move away from and make sure that people are safe.
Mr. Salas, thank you. Brian?
Alex, thank you. This question is for both of you. Both sides of Congress agree the southern border needs massive upgrades. I was recently on assignment at the port of entry in Nogales, Arizona, where I asked the Border Protection Director about his needs. Listen.
We're doing everything we can with the resources we have. It's up to our congressional people to get more funding for equipment, personnel, or any other needs that we have. A lot of U.S. citizens travel abroad and they come back through the border, so closing the border is not an option.
And Mr. Salas, we will come to you first, sir. With the country already $35 trillion in debt, specifically, where would money for those upgrades come from? You have 30 seconds.
Look, we need to make sure that our border's secure. We need to make sure that our communities are safe. I've traveled to and from through the border here in California down to Mexico to visit family, and you know, we need to make sure that they have the resources that they need to make sure that that's taken care of. You know, what I can tell you is people are still scared about the rhetoric that's still coming out from the other side. Tearing families apart is a wrong approach. We need to make sure that people are safe. We need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can. In fact, Congress actually had an immigration border deal, but it was the Republicans in Congress that actually stopped it.
Mr. Salas, thank you. Mr. Valadao, the same question to you. Specifically, where would money for border upgrades come from? You also have 30 seconds.
So we've put different money into different sides of it. Obviously, we have to do things like personnel. There's a shortage of a number of Border Patrol agents that need to be on the border, and when they pick up someone who's trying to come across, they'll actually spend a lot of time in the office with paperwork and stuff, so it delays the process. So Border Patrol personnel is important, but also we invest in things like autonomous cameras that really make a difference. They help us spot people and actually track them so that we can send Border Patrol agents to the right spot, make sure that they interact with them, and hopefully turn them around or process them once we know who they are.
Mr. Valadao, thank you. Alex has your next question.
We turn now to the economy, and the unemployment rate here in the Central Valley is 2 times higher than the national average. In a recent Emerson College Next Star Media poll, 62% of voters in the 22nd District said they have had to choose between paying for groceries or paying for utilities. Mr. Valadao, this question is for you. In 2014, you voted against raising the federal minimum wage, which is currently $7.25 an hour, an annual income of just $15,000. Since then, the cost of living has gone up dramatically. What do you think is a livable minimum wage? And please give us a number. You have 60 seconds.
There's no number to give. Each state should have the right to make their own decisions. You can't have a federal minimum wage when you've got states like Kentucky and Arkansas and others where obviously cost of living is a lot less. California has a higher minimum wage. It sits at $15 now, and then for fast food workers it's up over $20. And so the idea that we're going to pass federal legislation to go broad across the country makes no sense. Now the reason why costs are up is, again, because we live in a state that's been governed by a supermajority Democrats. Rudy Salas has been there for 10 years serving with Governor Newsom, and they continue to increase prices on folks. I mean, you see fuel price at the highest level in the nation. We've got the highest fuel prices of anywhere in the nation currently. We've got the highest housing prices. We've got the highest food costs. We've got the highest pretty much everything across the board. And the legislation that continues to come out of the state legislature, like today in a special session, you see the Assembly passing more legislation that even a Democrat governor from Arizona is acknowledging would raise the price of fuel. And so we have to look at the source of the problem. The source of the problem is the supermajority in Sacramento that my colleague here has spent the majority majority of his career in and was a part of.
Mr. Valadao, thank you. Mr. Salas, the same question to you now, sir. What do you think is a livable minimum wage? Could you give us a number, please? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, I supported the minimum wage here in California. We should pay people what they're worth. I know Mr. Valadao talked about him voting against a $7.25 minimum wage for any worker. I don't know anybody that can live off of wage at $7.25, which he voted against. You know, he's talking about costs in Sacramento. In fact, I was one of the leading champions to fight against higher costs here in the state of California. I was the only Assembly Democrat to vote no on the gas tax. I actually helped California negotiate lower medicine prices, something that Mr. Valadao failed to do in Congress, something that, you know, when Medicare had a chance to lower and negotiate lower prescription medicines, he voted against it.
Mr. Salas, thank you.
I think it's important to address that. He talks about his one time that he voted on the gas tax, but there's actually 39 total votes. One that he voted the right way, 38 that he voted the wrong way. So I think it's important to clarify that there were plenty of opportunities to actually do something. And if you actually look at our gas prices, if he says he lowered our prices, it does not show at the gas pump. I mean, we're literally the highest gas prices in the nation, and they continue to brag about it as if they've done something positive.
And we will get to gas and oil in just a moment.
Thank you.
Mr. Salas, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brian has your next question.
And this next question is for both of you gentlemen. And Mr. Salas, we will begin with you, sir. In April, California passed a minimum wage increase for fast food workers, taking wages to $20 an hour. Restaurant owners are telling us they've had to cut hours, pull benefits, and raise prices as a result, some even forced to close. How do you protect business owners while providing Californians with a livable wage? Mr. Salas, you have 60 seconds.
Yes, we need to protect workers and we need to protect our business owners. It's something that we've always constantly fought to do. That's why I've been named a small guardian for the Small Business Association here in the state. And it's why I continue to keep pushing to make sure that we're making sure that costs are coming down. It's making sure that we're doing everything that we can to bring down those costs, right? Things that Mr. Valadao's failed to do in Congress, whether it's the price of medicine, whether it's just affordable housing, whether it's any price to bring things down to alleviate the cost for actual people here in the Central Valley, he's failed to do.
Mr. Salas, thank you. Mr. Valadao, that same question to you, sir. How do you protect business owners while providing Californians with a livable wage? You also have 60 seconds.
Well, when you look at the state legislature passing literally 1,000 new laws a year, every year our business owners have to look at and watch the news on January 1st of 1,000 new laws that they've got to find a way to deal with. And those costs are being borne by these folks. If you're a trucking company, do you think you can afford $4 and $5 diesel? Can you afford the insurance at the rates that they're going up to? And that's why businesses are fleeing California to other states. And the issue that we're dealing here is we've got a person who's been in office for 10 years in a supermajority and has the ability to pass anything he wants to solve our problems. But instead of fixing the problems of the state, he wants to now run for Congress and put those problems on the rest of the nation so people don't have a place to flee to. And the results here is that we need to fix the problems in California, and we need to continue to be productive at the federal level so that our businesses can be competitive. And that's tax policy, trade policy, energy policy. All those things play a role in lowering the cost for business so that we can afford to do business here in the United States and bring dollars in and add to our economy.
Mr. Valadao, thank you, sir. Alex.
We recently polled voters in the 22nd Congressional District, and we asked them if they have ever considered leaving California because of the high cost of living. 61% of those polled said yes, they have considered leaving California. In fact, here's what some voters have to say.
I don't really make too much. I'm not like 21 an hour right now, and that's really not enough to buy a house when it's around like $350,000 and $350,000. That is. It feels like every year everything's going up, and they do raise our wages every now and then, but it doesn't really match up with what the price of living is really.
Our question to both of you tonight, is the California dream dead? Mr. Salas, we will begin with you. You have 60 seconds.
Look, I'm trying to live and make the American dream affordable for everybody. I grew up here in the Central Valley. I grew up in a single-family household with one income. You know, I know what it means to work extra shifts and to work overtime to pay the bills. That's why my entire career has been spent on trying to lower costs for Californians, trying to make things more affordable, trying to make healthcare more affordable, trying to make housing more affordable. You know, things that my opponent, who's been in Congress for over a decade, has failed to continue to do. He actually voted against affordable housing. He actually voted against capping the price of insulin at $35, knowing that we have some of the largest diabetic rates in the entire country, let alone here in the Central Valley.
Mr. Salas, thank you. Mr. Valadao, the same question to you. Is the California dream dead? You also have 60 seconds.
No, the California dream's not dead, but we do have to change what's going on in Sacramento. And the fact that he served there for 10 years, again, in the supermajority, where they have the ability to pass all the legislation they could possibly want to make a difference for our community. They've not done that. If we want to bring homes into the Central Valley, we've got to change the regulations. Currently, for someone to build a home, a third of the cost is the regulatory process. So every person out there watching right now, $300,000 home, $100,000 of that is just paperwork, because Sacramento thinks it's important to do paperwork, and that is adding to the cost. You look at a trucking company or a dairy farm or any other farm. We've got people retiring and leaving the state because of the amount of bureaucratic tape that is being thrown at them on a regular basis. And again, it's because Sacramento's turned into a bill factory, and that's what they like to celebrate. And so if there were 10 years of service, which we've served the exact same amount of time, so the attack of, well, he's been over whatever, we served the exact same amount of time in elected office. But he's been in the state where the problems are being created, and we're in the federal level trying to prevent Sacramento's problems from flowing across the nation.
Mr. Valadao,
if I may.
You. 15 seconds.
15 seconds, yeah. Mr. Valadao continues to bring up Sacramento when he's been in Congress. He's been elected longer than I have. Congress can overrule anything that the states do, but he's failed to do that.
All right.
Obviously, math's not his thing. It's 10 years. We both served 10 years.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Addition is not your thing, apparently.
No. Have you were in the state legislature before, and you were in Congress.
You just said I was in Congress.
All right, gentlemen.
You were in both, right?
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. We're going to move on. Brian?
As both of you know, homelessness is a key issue for Central Valley voters. At last count, there are nearly 5,000 homeless people living in Fresno and Madera counties. That is a 10-year high. The state and federal government has spent billions in homeless funding. However, an audit shows California failed to track its homelessness spending and outcomes. This question is for both of you gentlemen, and Mr. Salas, we will come to you first. On the federal side, how will you, sir, guarantee that funding for homelessness will, 1, get to its intended recipients, and 2, produce results? Mr. Salas, you have 60 seconds.
Yeah, homelessness is an issue that we definitely need to deal with. Congress needs to be doing more. Congress needs to make housing more affordable. Legislation needs to be passed to put people in homes, to help with first-time home buyers credit so that people can achieve the American dream. The other side of that token is we need to deal with mental health. Some of the things that I've tackled at the state capitol to help do that. You know, Congress has failed to act to actually push to make sure that the accountability is there so that we're putting people in homes, making sure that the mental health resources are there, and making sure that our locals aren't overwhelmed.
Mr. Salas, thank you, sir. Mr. Valadao, the same question to you. I'll repeat it. How will you, sir, guarantee that funding for homelessness will, 1, get to its intended recipients, and 2, produce results? You also have 60 seconds.
So serving on the Appropriations Committee, I've been able to help with some direct funding requests here in the Valley. So right now we're working on a homeless shelter here in Bakersfield, about $9 million that I've brought in for that. And I've also helped with CAP-K, bringing another $4 or $5 million there with some food assistance there with their food bank. And we're going to continue to look for ways to provide those resources. Obviously, a lot of this falls on the state, but the homeless situation itself, yes, we've got a shortage of mental health professionals that can help folks before they get to the point where they're self-medicating and on the streets, but we have to address that. We also need to change the rules, and currently there's a ballot initiative, Prop 36, that's on the ballot, which I support, which will allow law enforcement to play a stronger role and help force people to go through the process to get clean and get off the drugs, and hold these criminals at least off the streets until they can get into a better spot. And those are the types of things that need to happen. Sadly, Sacramento has failed, and so our DAs and other local community folks got together and raised the money and put Prop 36 on the ballot. That's going to make a difference. But at the federal level, it's the things I've been doing. Funding for our local law enforcement, if it's a local police station with radios, vehicles. I helped with the dispatch center. So we're going to continue on that front. Homeless shelter, food banks. Those are all things that I've done and delivered on and will continue to work on.
Mr. Valadao, thank you, sir. Alex?
The Supreme Court recently gave local governments greater ability to enact and enforce criminal penalties for those living in homeless encampments. A recent study by 17 News conducted back in June found the 3 major shelters here in Bakersfield are often at capacity. Simply put, there are not enough beds for the amount of people living on the streets. Mr. Valadao, this question is for you tonight. Should people living in encampments face jail time or face fines even if local shelters do not have enough beds? You have 60 seconds.
I think on a case-by-case basis. I mean, you've got folks that are just living on the street and not doing anyone any harm. The problem that we're having here in the Central Valley, especially in Bakersfield and some of these communities, you've got homeless folks that are literally walking into businesses and they've got to lock their front door to keep them out. And they're high on drugs, they're creating havoc, they're distractions, they're destroying personal property, and some of them are being pretty obscene, taking clothes off and doing things like that. And that has to be addressed. If people are crossing the line like that, they need to be handled and at least put in a facility where they can be held until they can get at least clean and get them some sort of help. Sadly, the laws in California are a little bit more difficult, so you don't have the ability to do that. Supreme Court is helping. Prop 36 will help make that a little bit stronger so that law enforcement could actually hold people for a period of time and get them the help they desperately need.
Mr. Valadao, thank you. Mr.
Salas, you have voted for numerous pieces of legislation that aim to tackle homelessness here in California. The state has spent more than $24 billion on this issue since 2019, but the problem, sir, has only gotten worse. How do you explain the lack of results, and can you justify the continued use of taxpayer money on this issue? You have 60 seconds.
Yes, we need accountability for all the spending that's been spent by the government, right? We need to make sure that we're addressing homelessness, that we're making sure that we're providing the mental health professionals that we need to get people off the street, that we're providing the tools, building housing, putting people, even if it's in tiny homes, that we're building those tiny homes and putting them there, making sure that our locals have the resources to combat that. So whether that's the homeless centers or whether that's the food bank, we're doing that. That's why I've been so adamant about bringing in millions of dollars to help the food bank, to help the homeless centers, to help our mental health professionals so that they don't feel overwhelmed. We need to continue to make sure that the accountability is there, whether that's from the federal government, the state government, or the local government. We need to make sure that those resources are being put to use effectively and efficiently.
Mr. Salas.
I appreciate the shout out. Right. I think I did a pretty good job on delivering those items.
Mr. Salas,
actually,
thank you.
You voted against some of those.
Gentlemen, thank you. Alex has your next question.
Last month, Governor Gavin Newsom signed legislation that enforces longer sentences for those convicted of large-scale retail theft. He also has deployed extra CHP officers here in Bakersfield in an effort to prevent these crimes. This is a question for both of you tonight. What more can be done here in our state and across the Central Valley to help small business owners who are taking the brunt of the retail theft problem? Mr. Salas, we will begin with you. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. I actually introduced legislation on this smash and grab. I did it in a bipartisan fashion with Democrats and Republicans, because this is something where we need to protect our small business owners, but even like the cashiers and the people working at these small businesses need to make sure that they have the support that they need. We need to go after these criminals that are going in and robbing these stores, putting people and the public at risk. That's why I've always been a strong proponent not only for the small businesses but for public safety. In fact, that's why the Police Chiefs Association named me in the past as Legislator of the Year, because we're able to work together to try to solve these problems. Thank you.
Mr. Salas, thank you so much. The same question to you, Congressman Valadao, and I will repeat it. What more can be done in our state and across the Central Valley to help small business owners who are taking the brunt of the retail theft problem? You once again have 60 seconds.
And well, as the person on the stage here who was actually endorsed by law enforcement, and I'm not referring to an endorsement from 10 years ago, I'm the guy that's actually been strong on law enforcement, making sure they have the authority and the tools they need to solve this problem. Obviously, we have to do everything we possibly can. Prop 36 is going to be helpful, but even some of the legislation I've worked on, like the bill that I'm working, that I've got bipartisan support on, that actually helps us create a task force so we can go after some of the criminals that are robbing transportation, if it's train, trucks, and all the different facilities, because they are crossing state lines. It becomes a federal issue, and that's where we're able to focus on some of that attention. Now, the smash and grabs of your local communities, sadly, that falls to the state, and the state has failed miserably on that front. And so the locals have had to come up with a proposition to try to resolve that issue. It is something that needs to be addressed. We work with, again, the law enforcement so we can bring in some resources. I've brought in dollars, if it's for, again, police vehicles, body-worn cameras, cops grants so we can get more police officers on the ground, or even money for other facilities that help offset the cost of hiring enough officers to be on the ground there.
Mr. Valadao, thank you. Brian has your next question.
Fentanyl is called the worst drug crisis in history. U.S. officials say China is the primary source, with a man-made opioid created by drug cartels in Mexico. This is a question for both of you. Mr. Salas, we will begin with you tonight. The U.S. is already trying to sanction cartel members and those associated with cartels. Should Congress hold the government of Mexico responsible, and how, for the mass number of drugs coming across our southern border? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, the government needs to do everything it can to make sure that the public is safe here in the United States and here in California and here in the 22nd Congressional District. That's why I fought so hard to make sure that we get that funding to make sure that public safety has the resources that they need to do that. That's why I've introduced legislation to actually tackle the opioid and fentanyl problem, was something that I've done in a bipartisan manner, something that we've also looked at and actually passed here. Now, more needs to be done. I will tell you that if I'm sent to Congress, I will support funding to make sure that our streets are safer. I know Mr. Valadao, when he had an opportunity to vote for more DEA agents at the border, he actually voted against it. He voted to cut DEA agents. He actually voted to cut law enforcement officials. I think that's the wrong approach. I think we need to make sure that our streets are safe.
Mr. Salas, thank you.
Mr. Valadao, the same question to you. Should Congress hold the government of Mexico responsible, and how, for the influx of drugs coming through our southern border? You have 60 seconds.
I mean, holding them responsible is probably not the appropriate term. They need to be a partner in this, and they need to be an active partner in this. And we have to work with our legislators, our colleagues across the aisle, but also our colleagues across the border. And the president needs to work with the other president. But ultimately, it's our responsibility as a country to make sure our border is secure. Legislation like H.R. 2 that is passed off the House floor that Senator Schumer is sitting on is the type of legislation that would actually make a difference. We have to make sure that we're watching our ports of entry, funding those different departments that oversee. If it's the USDA inspecting trucks, or if it's the Border Patrol watching the border, or whatever agency it is that is in charge of that specific sector of the border, those need to be addressed. Now, as far as defunding anything, that's not true. Obviously, we've worked on making sure that we funded all the different programs we possibly can, but we also have to have policies that function. Just sending money to an agency, but then having policies in place that welcome these folks in and allow them to abuse our system is exactly what's caused the problem we're in, and that's all happened in the last 4 years.
Mr. Valadao, thank you.
30 minutes down, 30 more minutes to go. We are at the halfway point. We have much more to come here tonight, including topics that will directly impact you and your family right here in the Central Valley. We are back in just 2 minutes.
Live from Bakersfield, you are watching the 22nd Congressional Debate. I'm Alex Fisher from KGET here in Bakersfield.
And I'm Brian Dormer with CBS 47 News in Fresno.
We turn now to the war in the Middle East, which has escalated significantly over the past 48 hours. Mr. Valadao, this first question is for you. After Iran launched a missile attack on Israel yesterday, you reiterated your stance that Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel's expected counterattack could include Iran's nuclear facilities. President Biden says that course of action could tip this conflict out of control. Mr. Valadao, specifically, where is your red line on Israel when it comes to Israel defending itself? And how far would be too far? You have 60 seconds.
So it's not my place to make a decision on what their red line is or what is too far. My responsibility is to make sure that our ally, our greatest ally in the region, has the ability to defend itself. I mean, 200 missiles sent into a country just randomly into whatever parts, targeting civilians, is inappropriate, is something that needs to be responded to. And taking out their nuclear sites, I feel, is a valid response. But that's up to them. And the fact that this president is holding back, I mean, all this started because a year ago he pulled back on the embargo and allowed Iran to start to develop those missiles and drones. And those are the things that we've seen attacks coming from, and they're playing a role in attacking Israel and also attacking other allies in the region. And those weapons are a huge problem. And sadly, this president has failed on that front. He doesn't continue to push back, and he should not be holding back another country from defending itself. They should have the ability to do so, and in any way they see fit to do so.
Mr. Valadao, thank you.
And Mr. Valadao, a follow-up for you, if I may. How can Congress ensure that this war does not expand any further and that U.S. ground troops don't end up involved in this conflict? You have 30 seconds.
Well, obviously, we don't want to see any of our folks fighting a war in the Middle East. So I think we've done enough of that over the last few years. And so the reality of the situation is to allow Israel to do what they see fit, because they've got the intel on the ground. They live there in the region, and they have the best at least feeling for what they need to do. And so the fact that our president came out and told them to back off or to slow down, I just don't feel that's the appropriate way for us to handle it. I think we need to be supportive of our ally and allow them to do as they need to do.
Mr. Valadao, thank you. Mr. Salas, where is your red line, sir, on Israel when it comes to Israel defending itself? How far is too far? You also have 60 seconds.
Thank you. Yeah, Israel needs to defend itself. You know, they need to be given the tools to do so. I can tell you, look, I'm just a Central Valley guy. My grandfather just told me, like, look, you stick with your friends, you stick with your family, right? Israel is our friend in the region. We need to make sure that we get back to a negotiated peace. To me, I think we need to go back to the Camp David Accords, something where we were really close at actually negotiating peace in the Middle East. That's something that in Congress I would push for and something I would support.
Mr. Salas, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll follow up, Mr. Salas. According to Gaza's health ministry, more than 40,000 people have been killed in the war in Gaza. The one-year anniversary of this war is on Monday, and there's no end in sight. Do you approve of the way Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has handled this conflict? You have 30 seconds.
Look, we need to make sure that we're doing everything to minimize civilian casualties. I mean, civilians should not be a part of this equation, but sadly they are. So that's why I think getting back to the Camp David Accords, negotiating a peace between everyone in the Middle East, including Gaza, including Israel, including the greater region, that's the pathway to go forward. That's a negotiated long-term peace that will bring stability to the region.
A quick clarification, do you approve the way Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has handled this crisis?
I think he's could have done a lot better job to make sure that we minimize those casualties for everyone involved.
Mr. Salas, thank you. Brian?
Well, as both of you know, water and ag, they are essential here in the Central Valley. This next question, it is for both of you. Mr. Salas, we will begin with you. The question comes from Ryan Jacobson, the CEO of the Fresno County Farm Bureau.
The 22nd Congressional District has seen significant water cutbacks the last 2 decades. What infrastructure projects and regulatory changes do you propose to increase water reliability here in the Valley, and how do you overcome the long-standing environmental opposition to these projects?
Mr. Salas, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you. We need to make sure that we're bringing more infrastructure dollars back for safe drinking water, for water delivery, for conveyance. It's why I actually carried legislation and actually got a water project funded right here in the Central Valley to actually help between the state and federal system with conveyance. That's something that I would, if I'm given the opportunity to go to Congress, is to make sure that that infrastructure money and those dollars and those resources are coming back to the Central Valley. That's something that Mr. Valadao had a chance to vote on, that infrastructure bill. He voted no. He voted no to actually helping fix the water pipe. So he'll talk a lot about water, but when it comes actually down to bringing in the resources to fix those, he actually voted no.
Mr. Salas, thank you. Mr. Valadao, I will repeat the question for you. What infrastructure projects and regulatory changes do you, sir, propose to increase water reliability in the Valley? And how do you, sir, overcome the long-standing environmental opposition to these proposals? You also have 60 seconds.
So the infrastructure bill was a bill that was passed. My 2 biggest problems with that are 2 things that I think need to be addressed. One, they would not touch permitting reform. So we can look at projects like Shasta that's been in the books for 70 years, and California won't allow that to be built because the permitting process is too long. My ask from the administration was permitting reform so we could actually build projects. And number 2, they actually exempt. They will not allow Shasta, the cheapest water storage project that we can build right now in the state of California, is not allowed to be built under that. Those are my 2 asks. Fix that. And so I've got legislation there that brings back the biological opinions 2019 that allows us to move water through the Delta so we can actually bring water into the Central Valley, increase infrastructure, but the permitting process needs to be fixed. We've got Lake Success that took 30 years to expand an existing reservoir by 10 feet. I know he likes to point fingers at one vote on an infrastructure bill that wouldn't have solved our problems, but the reality is we need to fix our permitting reform, and we need to focus on projects that actually deliver water, especially the affordable ones like Shasta, like Sites Reservoir, like other projects that we've built here. And I'm going to continue to do things like I did with the Wind Act that actually delivered and brought in hundreds of millions of dollars to fix capacity in the Frank-Kern Canal. Those are projects that have gotten done and been successful on.
Thank you, Mr. Valadao. Alex?
One of the biggest issues those watching tonight face are high gas prices here in California. We asked voters, how much do high gas prices impact them? Take a listen.
Oh, they're insane. So when I first moved out to Oklahoma, it was in 2019. I paid 98 cents at a small little town, filled up my Tacoma, and it's $4.50 today I filled up for. So it's a little wild. So yeah, it's kind of smothering.
So a question for both of you. Much of that pain at the pump comes from taxes. California Democrat Josh Harder has introduced legislation that would suspend the federal gas tax. How would you vote on that measure and why? We will begin with you, Mr. Salas. You have 60 seconds.
I would support Congressman Harder's suspension of the gas tax. In fact, it's consistent with my votes that I've already taken. I was the only Assembly Democrat to vote no on the gas tax. I've been consistent on that all the way through. I know that people are suffering. People are hurting. This is why I wrote an op-ed that talked about here in the Central Valley, people have to drive for everything. You have to drive to drop off your kids. You have to drive to go to work. You have to drive to and from school. You have to drive for anything you want to do, even if it's buying groceries. That's why I've always been consistent with voting no on the gas tax, and I would support Congressman Harder's proposal.
Mr. Valadao, we will ask you the same question. How would you vote on suspending the federal gas tax and why? You also have 60 seconds.
So I would gladly support it. Josh Harder's a friend of mine. 18 cents is helpful, but we're the highest fuel prices in the nation. And so we actually need to go a lot further than that. I was very aggressive with the governor, even when my opponent was there in the state legislature to ask him to prevent the 50-cent gas tax from being implemented. That's something that should have been addressed as well. There were multiple votes, and obviously he wasn't there. And then the other one is cap and trade, which the legislative analyst here in California said would add 73 cents to the price of a gallon of gas. And my opponent here voted for that. And you've continued to see the problems that we're dealing with. Even this week, Governor Newsom is continuing to push these policies that are going to increase fuel prices. Democrat and Republican governors on our bordering states are complaining to the governor, asking him to not do this. I've been vocal. I've gotten my colleagues to sign letters, and I've heard crickets from my opponent.
Mr. Valadao.
If I could answer, since I've been incited
15
here.
seconds. Mr.
Thank you.
Salas.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. Look, I'm the only one on this stage that's actually voted to lower costs and to lower actual gas costs. Mr. Valadao had an opportunity to vote on a measure that would lower the gas tax by 15 cents, but he failed to do that.
All right, Mr. Salas, thank you. Brian?
Alex, thank you. And Mr. Salas, you have mentioned here tonight voting against raising California's gas tax. Democrats, they responded by stripping you of your committee chairmanship. Since then, you've received criticism from Republicans for missing at least 4 votes on freezing annual gas tax increases. You've said that you only vote on the final version of bills. Sir, my question to you is, why is that? And what do you say to those who argue that lawmakers should be involved in the entire process? You have 60 seconds.
Yes, I was the only Assembly Democrat to vote no on the gas tax. It was covered throughout the entire country, covered here extensively. I took a beating for it. I lost my chairmanship over it. I was punished for standing up for Central Valley families by voting no on the gas tax. It was covered extensively. It's a vote that I would take again. It's a vote that's been very consistent. Now, as to the other part of your question, you know, a lot of times the reason why I'm so effective in bringing millions of dollars and resources back home to tackle our problems is because I'm able to work with Democrats and Republicans to let them fix their bills, offer them ideas on how to fix their bills, so that we can actually get things done for Californians, so we could actually get things done for Central Valley families. That's why I've been successful in making sure we brought back like $10 million for the cancer center, making sure that we kept the local hospital open and from closing its doors, making sure that we funded a 911 dispatch center, replaced safe drinking water wells. It's why I've been so effective.
The question to you, sir, is what do you say to those who argue lawmakers should be involved in the entire process? 15 seconds for clarification.
Yes, we are involved in the entire process by offering amendments, by talking with our colleagues to make sure that they're putting legislation that's better for Central Valley families.
Mr. Salas, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Alex has your next question.
We turn to the presidential race now. Mr. Valadao, you were one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach President Donald Trump following the January 6th Capitol riot. At the time, you said Trump, without question, was a driving force in the catastrophic events that took place that day. Out of those 10 Republicans, only 2, including yourself, are still in office. So my question to you is, who do you plan to vote for in next month's election and why? You have 60 seconds.
So I'm going to let history decide how that vote plays out. And so I've taken a position where I'm not going to get involved in the presidential, and I'm not going to pick or announce who I'm voting for just for the sheer purpose of any mention of who I'm voting for is going to be perceived as an endorsement. And so I've chosen to run my own race, focus on the 22nd Congressional District, and not get involved in the presidential race. And I'm going to stick to that one.
Do you feel as though the voters in your district deserve to know who you will be voting for in next month's election? You have 15 seconds for clarification.
No, I have a record of delivering for the Central Valley with all the different water projects and all the different types of things that I've been able to bring here for the Central Valley. And I think the voters want to see someone who's effective, who's not afraid to take on their own party, and someone who knows how to deliver for them in Washington. And they'll see that as me, and I believe they will support me for it.
A quick follow-up, Mr. Valadao. Do you think someone that you voted to impeach is a responsible choice for president? You have 30 seconds.
Again, when we look at this situation that we're dealing with, my vote will speak for itself, and history will be the judge of that. And to try to get involved and try to relive and relitigate that situation is just not helpful rhetoric right now.
Mr. Valadao, thank you.
Thanks.
Ryan?
Gentlemen, let's turn to the topic of abortion. And Mr. Salas, this next question goes to you, sir. In 2022, you co-sponsored a measure that enshrined abortion rights in California's Constitution. Some argue that it is too broad and unrestrictive and allows for late-term abortions. We know, sir, that you support a woman's right to make her own decisions, but it's unclear, sir, where you stand on how far along into a pregnancy you support an abortion. Can you clarify your stance for us tonight? You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. I have always believed that this decision should be left between a woman, her doctor, and within her own faith. Women should have the freedom to choose what happens with their own bodies and to determine their own health care. I would leave it up to the experts. I would leave it up to the doctors, to the women, and to the and within her own faith. I don't think politicians like David Valadao or anybody else should be interjecting themselves to make those decisions. You know, Mr. Valadao is a co-sponsor of one of the most extreme national bans on this abortion women's health care issues. He wouldn't even allow exceptions for rape. He would not allow exceptions even if the life of the mother is on the line, even if she's a single mom and has 2 other kids at home. This is a big difference between me and Mr. Valadao on this issue.
Mr. Salas, to just clarify, how far along into a pregnancy would you support an abortion? 15 seconds.
That's up to a doctor, a woman, and within her own faith. I'm not a doctor.
Mr. Salas, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Valadao, ads are running ahead of this election, calling your views on abortion extreme, suggesting that you are on a crusade to ban abortion. What do you say to that? And on a federal level, if asked to vote on a 15-week federal abortion ban, which has been discussed, how would you vote? You have 60 seconds.
So I would vote no. I do not support a national abortion ban. I think since the Dobbs decision, it's been left up to the state, and the states are going to manage it. I do support, I am pro-life. I do support the exceptions, obviously rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And I do support IVF. I think those are important, and I think we need to fight for those. But at the federal level, we've already seen that both candidates running for president aren't going to touch a national abortion ban, and I think it's a non-issue. And it won't come up in the Senate because there's not going to be enough of a vote majority one way or the other to actually bring it up. So I actually think this is a non-issue that's not going to move forward at any federal level, and so I don't actually believe I have to vote on it.
Mr. Valadao, thank you.
If I may, I wouldn't call this a non-issue. It's the #1 issue that women raise with me when going door to door and talking to them. You know, Mr. Valadao is a co-sponsor of a national abortion ban, which would include California. So let's just be clear about that.
Mr. Valadao, follow up to you, sir, if I may. Exceptions for rape, incest, and life of a mother were not included in the Life at Conception Act. If you support exceptions for abortion, why did you co-sponsor the bill?
So that bill was a few years back. I'm not a current co-sponsor of the legislation. That was before the Dobbs decision, and so obviously a lot has changed in the world since that decision was made by the Supreme Court, and I've not co-sponsored that bill in this Congress.
Mr. Valadao, thank you, sir. Alex has your next question.
Turning to drug prices now and health care, nearly 80% of Kern County residents are considered overweight or obese, and more people die of diabetes here in Kern County than anywhere else in the state. Mr. Valadao, in March 2022, you voted against the Affordable Insulin Now Act, which capped the price of insulin at $35. You joined a majority of Republicans and voted against that measure. Can we get you here on the record tonight and ask you, why did you vote against that? And specifically, what would you have needed to see in that measure in order for it to pass? You have 60 seconds.
Well, I appreciate the question. And so obviously I support lower costs for medicines for across the board, not just insulin. And I've supported legislation there, and I've voted for legislation that actually helps lower the cost of medications across the board. And we do that through things like tort reform, regulatory reform, transparency, and competition. The reality is the piece of legislation that you're specifically brought up is an arbitrary cap that would actually put us in a situation where we would be relying on imported medicines, and we want to make sure that we're buying our medicines from the safest possible sources. If we're going to put an arbitrary cap, you're going to put in a situation where pharmacies and companies that are buying these prescription drugs are going to have to purchase it from countries that do not meet our standards. And the idea that we're going to inject ourselves with products from countries that are just meeting the price point instead of actually making sure that we're delivering a safe product that we can use as a medicine here in the Central Valley and across the nation, I think is a very important point that was not addressed, and that's something that I think we need to point out and have a part of the conversation.
Mr. Valadao, thank you. Brian?
A question for you, Mr. Salas. Congressional lawmakers recently took on drug makers of obesity drugs like Ozempic, saying that prices in the United States are dramatically higher than other countries. Senator Bernie Sanders says that companies are ripping us off. Do you agree with the senator? And what would you do, sir, to tackle the price of new obesity drugs? You have 60 seconds.
Look, this is the price of medicine. We need to make sure we're doing everything to negotiate lower prices for Americans and for Californians and for Central Valley families. That's why I allowed the state of California to use its negotiating power to lower the price of medicine, to actually look at things like Alex just talked about for insulin, for instance, making sure that we're bringing those prices down. It's something that I think we should go further upon. Mr. Valadao voted against capping the price of insulin for people with diabetes at $35 for seniors. I think that's something that we should do for everybody. Mr. Valadao voted against even allowing Medicare to negotiate lower prices, medicine prices. So when he says he's for lower medicine prices, that's not where his votes are.
Mr. Salas, thank you. Mr. Valadao, I'll allow you 15 seconds to respond.
Well, and the problem with a lot of the legislation he's referring to ends up being a part of a larger package with some really bad poison pills in there. So to act like this is a standalone piece of legislation that anyone voted for is inaccurate. And the reality is you can't just negotiate a lower price and ask a company to lose money on a medicine. We have to actually work on lowering those costs, and that again is the regulatory side, tort reform. I mean, the lawsuits and everything else that they have to deal with, all those things play a vital role in making sure that we have the ability to deliver medication at an affordable price, and none of that is being addressed when you just simply negotiate.
Mr. Valadao, thank you, sir.
Be an effective
That is your time,
representative.
sir. Mr. Valadao, thank you. Alex?
All right, now to another issue that impacts so many residents here in the Central Valley. Some of the nation's largest homeowners insurance companies, including Allstate and State Farm, are pulling out of California because of wildfires and flooding. Natural disasters are leaving families scrambling to find coverage now more than ever. Mr. Valadao, this question is for you. Congressman Adam Schiff introduced the Insure Act back in January. It would create a federal reinsurance program at an initial cost of $50 billion. As a Republican, would you vote for that measure? You have 60 seconds.
I can't address a bill I haven't actually read. Obviously, I would take an honest interest in it and take a look. But the reality is, if you're going to look at solving the problems here, you've got to actually look at what we do to manage our forests, what we do to actually take care of the situation and the problem that is causing this. When you talk to the home builders about what the issue is to make houses more affordable, it is, again, the regulatory process, but also supply chain issues, bringing in lumber. If we did a better job of managing our forests, we would have more available lumber, more available supplies to build homes, make them more affordable. That has increased the cost of insurance. And then whenever there's a fire, obviously that destroys a lot of homes. Insurance costs are going to go up. So if we don't manage our forests, we're going to have a situation there where we're going to have more fires and more replacement costs, and that's going to increase insurance costs. Then if we don't manage our forests, the reality is the number of trees per acre is actually going to have an impact on the amount of water that flows south, because overpopulation of trees absorbs too much water and doesn't allow water to flow south, and it doesn't allow us to have that water in storage so we can use for irrigation and for our communities. I mean, the reality is we have to get to the root of this problem and actually look at how we solve the forest fire situation.
Mr. Valadao, thank you.
Mr. Salas, critics argue the Insure Act could have a dangerous effect in our state, encouraging more housing and developer growth in natural disaster-prone areas. We know California is always in need of more housing. Are the critics wrong? You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to look at the Insure Act to see exactly what it says. We know what we need to do is we need to keep our communities safe. We need to make sure that any housing projects that are put in, that they understand what those risks are, but we need to make sure people can actually afford their insurance, right? We need to make sure that we're doing all of these things. I'm happy to look at it with Congressman Schiff, or Senator Schiff, soon to be Senator Schiff, on the Insure Act. But, climate change is real. We need to make sure that we're tackling not only just wildfires, but all natural disasters.
Mr. Salas, thank you. Alex has your next question, gentlemen.
California is home to 1.8 million veterans, the largest veteran population of any state here in the U.S. Congressman Valadao, you secured language in a recent appropriations bill that requires the VA to begin construction on the Bakersfield VA clinic no later than September 2025, unless a court order prevents them from doing so. But even then, the clinic will take years to construct. What can Congress do right now to help veterans get the care that they desperately need? You have 60 seconds.
Well, continue to provide services through the existing facility is important, making sure they have access to even community health facilities, and which is the legislation we've passed. But that specific case of that facility is one that I continue to work with Secretary McDonough on. It's an important issue. Sadly, when I talk about tort reform and I talk about all these different problems that we're dealing with on the regulatory front, that's what's stopping that project. It's literally one person in Southern California, a developer, who is holding up that project by tying it up in the court process. And so, meeting with Secretary McDonough, we're going to continue to fight. This is a bipartisan effort. It's not just myself, but members of Congress on both sides of the aisle working with our senators. But if we don't fix our court process, we're going to continue to see projects like that tied up. And so we're going to continue to fight for that project, but we're going to continue to also work to make sure that the existing facilities are delivering the best possible care for our veterans as we possibly can.
Mr. Valadao, thank you.
Mr. Salas, in 2019, you authored legislation that would have provided tax exemptions for veterans, but that bill died, as you know, in committee. Other than financial relief, what concrete steps can Congress take to improve the lives of our veterans right here in the Central Valley? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, one is making sure that a VA hospital or clinic is opened up here locally. I could tell you that the veterans I speak to are, really upset with congressmen and Congress inaction on this. They've been promised for years and years that this would actually happen, and it is yet to actually occur. I've been a very strong supporter of our veterans. In fact, I've actually been awarded by the VFW and various veterans groups just for my work and participation with them. So whether we're helping on the mental health side, or even when we funded the strike teams to make sure that veterans were able to access their benefits at a time when a lot of them were having difficulties, that's where I stand with veterans, and I'll continue to keep doing that. And Congress needs to do more to make sure that we're having resources available for veterans, whether it's actually mental health, whether it's actually health care, whether it's the clinics, whether it's the VA hospital. But we need to make sure that we're treating our veterans with respect.
Mr. Salas, thank you. Alex, with your next question.
Let's turn to another topic that has a lot of people in California talking. And matter of fact, a lot of people here in the Central Valley are now seeing it in real time, the high-speed rail. Its price tag is now $128 billion. And testing will begin for the Bakersfield to Merced line in 2028. Mr. Salas, we'll begin with you. You say you voted against the high-speed rail since the beginning, despite the fact, according to the Rail Authority, the project has created 9,000 construction jobs for Central Valley residents. Why do you oppose this project? You have 60 seconds.
When the high-speed rail project came before me, I was telling folks that we could do this a lot better. We didn't have to cut through people's homes. We didn't have to cut through schools. We didn't have to cut through churches. And when they were not able to negotiate with me to make sure that we weren't having those impacts on our communities, it left me no other choice. So that's why I took the vote that I took, Alex.
Mr. Salas, thank you.
Congressman Valadao, you have said the high-speed rail project upended the lives of those living in Wasco, with construction leaving a negative impact on businesses, homes, and even air quality. With all of the criticism, where should that money be spent? You have 60 seconds.
Obviously we need to do more on our roads and our infrastructure. Expand 99 so that there's not so much congestion. Expand 5, which is a federal highway, but still look for ways to expand existing roadways that we are using. That's how we move goods. High-speed rail is just a sad project to watch it falter. I don't believe it'll be up and running in 2028. I personally don't actually see we'll see that project moving anytime soon. And then in the Wasco situation, that was one of the projects that when it came through that community, I met with local business owners. It was sad to see that they were losing access to their facilities, but also the farm worker camp there that they shut down. I was able to help secure some funds to build a new replacement there for farm worker housing, and also pressure high-speed rail to tear down the old facility that was attracting the homeless and making it dangerous for our law enforcement. And it's sad that high-speed rail has been such a disaster, but we've been able to work through some of the problems and try to help our communities to the best of our ability. And I think we've actually delivered on some pretty nice housing projects there in Wasco because of it.
Mr. Valadao, thank you. Well, listen, we have covered a lot of serious topics here tonight. We learned where you stand on these important issues for voters. We also want those watching right now just to get to know you a little bit better on a personal level. So a question for both of you. Talk to us about someone who inspired you and really changed your life. Mr. Salas, we will begin with you. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I would say it's my family and my grandfather. Quite honestly, it's like that's, my father, my grandfather is where I learned hard work. I grew up here in the Central Valley. I used to wake up before the sun came up to go to work out in the fields with my dad and my family. Right? It's just what you did to make sure that you can pay the bills. I went to all public schools here. Was the only one from my high school to go to UCLA. Had to work 2 jobs to kind of pay my way through. So, that for me is kind of what drives me. For me, it's about making a difference for families, people that grow up, giving them those opportunities, giving them the ability to achieve the American dream.
All right, Mr. Salas, thank you.
Mr. Valadao, we will ask you the same question. Talk to us about someone who inspired you and really changed your life. You also have 30 seconds.
I'd say my dad. My dad immigrated here when he was 25 years old, didn't speak the language, didn't know how to drive a car, bought his first car without a driver's license, learned to drive in that car because he didn't want to hurt anyone else's vehicle. Worked in a processing plant where he helped process pork, saved up enough money to buy some cows, started his dairy, and still to this day work alongside of him on the farm. Just this morning I was actually with the cows on the dairy trying to be helpful where I possibly could. I was a little bit difficult being back and forth from Washington, but to have that ability to work alongside someone who I had to help translate for, but when it came to doing math, when it came to running his business, was just an absolute genius and a true honor to watch as I grew up.
Mr. Valadao, thank you. All right, it is now time for closing statements. Mr. Valadao, we will begin with you. You have 30 seconds.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I want to thank you all for this opportunity to be here and talk to voters. As you saw, we had a debate here where we got to talk about different issues and the impacts we have in our communities. I'm proud of the record I've been able to deliver on for about $100 million in new infrastructure projects, everything from water wells in Delano to waste treatment facilities in McFarland to homeless shelters in Bakersfield, new roads in Porterville. We're going to continue to work for the Central Valley and continue to deliver for them. And so I'm proud of my record, and I ask for your vote so I can continue to serve the 22nd Congressional District in Congress. So thank you.
Mr. Valadao, thank you.
Mr. Salas, your closing statement, please. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I think in this debate, you saw a big difference between me and Mr. Valadao on the issues. I've been able to bring in millions of dollars to save our local hospital from closing, to put in new safe drinking water wells, to build a 911 dispatch center, to bring $10 million into our cancer treatment center, and bring over $100 million to both Cal State Bakersfield and also to BC. But let's look at the issues, right? The issues of the child tax credit, for instance, something that I think should help working families. On health care, I believe we should expand the ACA, and we should make sure that medicine like insulin is affordable to everybody, things that Mr. Valadao continues to vote against.
Mr. Salas, thank you so much, and thank both of you for taking part in this debate tonight.
All right, well, that will do it for us tonight. Thank you for joining us. And remember, Election Day is November 5th. Good night, everyone.